Thanks so much, Laura. We're here in Grassy Narrows, here beside Chief Rudy Turtle, our candidate for Kenora, and Sol Momokwa, a member of provincial parliament in the Ontario Legislative Assembly. And here in Grassy Narrows, this is a community that is one of the most powerful examples of the neglect of the federal government. The fact that the community has had mercury poisoning that has plagued the community for so long, and there's been so much inaction, is just such a horrible example of just the inaction of conservative and liberal governments. And most recently, when we saw a community activist, someone from Grassy Narrows, raising the concern about what will the federal government, what will Mr. Trudeau's government do about the mercury poisoning at a fundraiser, it is incomprehensible how Mr. Trudeau could have said this, but he sarcastically said, "Thank you for your donation," as he mocked someone raising a concern about a community. Another example of the two Mr. Trudeaus, someone in public who says Indigenous reconciliation is so important, but in private makes fun of someone who's raising a serious concern about a community impacted by mercury poisoning. Beyond that, now we've seen recently with Mr. Trudeau's government's decision to appeal the landmark Canadian Human Rights Tribunal decision to say Indigenous kids need to be compensated for the unequal funding, something that we've long known as being true. The fact that this is now being appealed, and the reasons for the appeal, again, are a complete betrayal of reconciliation. It is beyond any sort of comprehension how the government can talk about reconciliation on one hand and then abandon it on the other. These are just more and more examples of what is a massive issue of injustice that's not being addressed. And I want to make one last thing very clear, that we can tackle these problems. It's a matter of having the commitment to do so. The Parliamentary Budget Office makes it clear that the reason why the boil water advisories and the cleaning of water has not been done is because of a lack of funding. That $1.8 billion shortfall in commitments is the reason why we're not at the point where we're cleaning the water. That to me is just, again, unacceptable. It's wrong. When Mr. Trudeau can find the money to buy a pipeline, can find the money to give corporations billions of dollars in tax cuts, the fact is they could find the money, they're not doing it, and it is a choice that they're making. It's not by chance, it's not by coincidence, it's a choice.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Singh. So what exactly are you committing to this community when it comes to addressing the issues with mercury poisoning? Can you give us the exact dollar figure, as many specifics as possible?
Sure. So what the community has asked for is $19 million for a treatment center. Now, while that's what they need to deliver the type of treatment center that's required for a community that's been impacted by mercury, the Trudeau government has come back with a figure of $10 million. So half of what's needed, essentially. And of that, they've not delivered any of the funding, maybe 1%. Effectively, no money's been delivered. So for New Democrats, this is a priority. We would immediately move to commit to the $19 million, ensure that the treatment center is built, it's fully funded, and ensure that we're taking steps not to just clean the water and treat mercury poisoning that's impacting people now, but also a commitment to ensure we fund enough money to ensure that there's no more boil water advisories and drinking water issues in any Indigenous community across Canada.
Of course. Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. So $19 million for the construction of the mercury home, but there was also a request, I believe, from the community here for $88.7 million with a trust fund that would be secured for compensation with all of the health-related side effects. So what would an NDP government do in terms of funding for compensation here in Grassy Narrows? And also, Chief Turtle, maybe you could explain what the other hurdles have been to get this project forward and to move forward with compensation. Is that still a request from the First Nation here to have that money set aside, that $88 million set aside for future health concerns?
So what I can do, I'll speak to the general value, and then Chief Turtle will speak directly to your question. If we just take a step back, we've got a community that's faced injustice for over 50 years. There's been mercury poisoning that's directly impacting the people for 50 years. There's got to be a point in time, if we really are committed to reconciliation, where we say enough's enough, we need to take real action right away. So for me, my commitment is this. We need to do everything possible to provide treatment for people who are faced with mercury poisoning. We need to make sure that that treatment center is funded long term. We also need to make sure that we clean the water. whatever it takes to do these three things, I'm committing to do. These are so important that we cannot negotiate or be willing to compromise. If we want to solve the problem, there has to be a commitment to do that. That is my commitment. I believe that there is no excuse in 2019, with the wealth that we have as a nation, with the technology we have as a country, that we cannot clean this water, ensure that all communities have clean drinking water. I do not accept any excuses. I'm committing to do whatever it takes to get it done. Yeah, so I got to be really clear on this. Looking at a community that's faced with mercury poisoning, I've met with the kids, I've met with elders and seniors that have suffered from the poisoning. To me, we have to be willing to have the courage to do whatever it takes. And so, yes, I'm committing to the funds. There's no reason why Mr. Trudeau could find $4.5 billion to buy a pipeline, $14 billion to give away to the wealthiest corporations, but he couldn't find the money to make sure this community has the treatment center, it's fully funded, and clean drinking water. Do not accept that it could not be done. I accept what the PBO has said, that is simply a lack of courage, a lack of priority, not putting the money up to deal with the problem. I am prepared to do that.
So can you be a bit more specific about what your strategy would be in government to combat the boil water advisories? And also, it sounds a bit like, is this a blank check for Indigenous needs that are, we can say that they have not been met, certainly for decades, but is that what your promise is here today? You're saying whatever it takes, no matter what it costs. Is that a blank check for Indigenous communities if you're elected?
That is a firm commitment for justice. This is a firm commitment to remedy an injustice. Why is it that Indigenous communities, it's okay to have drinking water that's not clean? Why is it okay for that to exist, and why would that be a debate? Why would anyone question whether or not every Indigenous community should have clean drinking water? If this was an issue in Toronto, in Vancouver, in any city around the world, around Canada, there would be no debate. We would get it done. We wouldn't say, oh, how much is it going to cost? It's clean drinking water. Obviously, everyone should have it, and obviously our country should make it a priority. So yes, I'm saying let's do whatever it takes to clean that drinking water. And we already know roughly the figure. The PBO has indicated that there is a $1.8 billion shortfall. So that's roughly the amount that's being put forward as what we need to fund. So absolutely, we should be able to fund 1.8 billion. The government was able to find 14 billion to give away to the wealthiest corporations. They forgave $6 billion in corporate debt. Yes, I am committing, and I think it should be obvious that we can commit to cleaning drinking water for all Indigenous people.
Where's your strategy, though? What's your strategy for the water advisors to combat this problem?
The strategy is, if it is a problem, we've got the technology and we've got the money. What we've lacked, what we have lacked, what Mr. Trudeau has lacked, what Mr. Harper has lacked, is making it a priority. If we make it a priority, it can get done. It has not been made a priority. The PBO has made it very clear that it's not been a priority because they haven't put up enough funding to get it done. We will get it done because we believe it's a priority, and we will put the money in place to make sure it happens.
Michael Couture with Global National. Further to Kevin's point, are you just writing a blank check for all problems for all Indigenous communities across the country once you get into office?
So if Toronto had a drinking water problem, if Montreal had a drinking water problem, would you be asking the same question?
It's a lot of money, is what I'm saying, and people will look at it and go, how much money are we going to spend on all this, and how are you going to find that money?
That's a genuine question. Would you be asking this question if Vancouver did not have clean drinking water? Would you be asking this question if Edmonton did not have clean drinking water? No, you wouldn't. And that's what I'm saying. Why is it that we ask the question about whether or not Indigenous people should have clean drinking water? We got to take a minute and think, why is that even a question? Yes, they deserve clean drinking water. Yes, we can make it happen. It's a matter of priority, and I'm going to do it.
I want to ask Chief Turtle a question. What has it been about the Trudeau government that has frustrated you so much that you've decided that you now want to run for the NDP? And tell me a little bit about their dealings with you over this deal to try and get the treatment plant in the health center.
Well, first of all, I think that what's been very frustrating is all the stalling tactics that they've been using, and quite often they'll just be quoting regulations and procedures and things that are normally done. Well, this is not a normal situation. like it's been 50 years since we've had mercury poisoning here in Grassy Narrows. And also the other things is that I've traveled the communities already. I've been to different communities, and there's still communities that have poor running water. There's this one community that I've been to where they can't start their school year because their water treatment plant is not running. And it's not fair to that community that they can't start their school year just because their water treatment plant is not running well. That's wrong, and I'm not happy with that. That should be fixed. I know that they're going around making these announcements here and there, but there's still lots of First Nations that need to be dealt with, and also not just First Nations, but small towns too, that they need drinking water too. That's something that I want to correct. Like I'm not running only on Indigenous issues. I'm also running for the municipalities and their issues and the surrounding area here in Kenora.
Adam Riley, Thunder Bay Television News. You said you'd open it up for clearing up boil water advisories in as many communities as you can. Many of those communities are far northern communities. They lack road access. Obviously, roads falls under the purview of the province. How do you plan to work with the provinces to be able to get that technology to those locations with the lack of roads that are up there?
We know that there's so many technologies available right now. There's so many ways to solve problems available right now. Really, to me, this is just a question of whether or not there's a priority to get it done. We can do incredible things. If it's a priority, it can get done. And the Parliamentary Budget Office has given a rough figure of what the gap is in how much funding is needed and how much funding has been delivered. That there's a $1.8 billion gap in the commitments that Mr. Trudeau has made, the Liberal government has made, to solving the problem, which includes northern and remote communities. So what I want to just put forward is a choice. These are just choices that our governments make. Mr. Trudeau made the choice to spend a lot of money. He spent $6 billion to forgive corporate loans, $14 billion in the fall economic statement to give away basically to the richest corporations so they could buy corporate jets and limousines. He gave away $4.5 billion of our public money to buy a pipeline. There's billions of dollars that are being spent. I think it's very reasonable to say that if Indigenous people cannot have access to clean drinking water, and the shortfall is $1.8 billion, that yes, we absolutely can find the money to do that, to make sure that Indigenous people have clean drinking water. No matter where they live across this country, it can be done. It's a matter of priority, and I'm making it a priority.
It was less about finding the money, though, is working with the provinces, because obviously we have a progressive conservative government in Ontario. How do you plan to work with that government to be able to get those roads built, to get this technology that you say we have to these communities?
Well, we absolutely will have to work with provincial governments, but for many of the solutions, it's a matter of providing the resources to the community, the training, the equipment being delivered to those communities. It can be done. There's ways that equipment is delivered to those communities already. There's infrastructure in those communities right now. It can be done. It's got to be made a priority, and I'm going to make it a priority.
Why won't you commit to a target of when you're going to lift boil water advisories the Liberals have at 2021?
Yeah, sorry, we have a target as well. I'm saying that, well, what I'm committing to immediately is
What's your target then? What's the NDP target? I'm sorry.
Yes, the same. Our target is actually get it done. We have the same target, but our target is to actually get it done. And our commitment is this. We're going to put the funding in place right away. The funding has not been put in place right away, and that to me is a concrete way. The target is important, but we know what's been lacking is the funding. So they can talk about their targets all day long, and that's been the problem. That Mr. Trudeau has made targets for reducing emissions, made targets for reducing boil water advisories, but making a target and then not backing it up is meaningless. And so what I'm saying is the concrete thing that the federal government can do is to put the money on the table. And we know the PBO has said it's a $1.8 billion shortfall. I'm going to put that money up front right away. To me, there's no time to wait. There's no reason to wait. If it is a priority, and it is for us, we will do that work right away.
A lot was said at this news conference about how there are policies and issues in our government that disproportionately advantage some Canadians and disadvantage Indigenous communities. Fair to say, and this is open to anyone here, that Canada's racist, so we have a government that's racist.
Oh, there's no question about it. If you look at the treatment of Indigenous people, there is a decision being made not to fund basic things like water. There is a decision being made to not ensure that Indigenous communities get the basic funding that's needed. The PBO has said that their commitments and what's needed to be done and what the Liberals are committing to, there's a 1.8 billion gap, a $1.8 billion gap. So clearly there is the concerted decision that the government's making. Now, when it came to giving the richest corporations money, they jumped into action, did $14 billion in the last fall economic statement. I can't highlight that enough. That is a clear decision that this government's making to say, corporations need help, we're going to jump to help them out. Mr. Trudeau says, if we need to buy a pipeline, I'm going to find the money, $4.5 billion right away. When Indigenous communities need clean drinking water, it's going to be tough. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. That is what we're seeing. That is not a chance, that's not a coincidence, that is a decision. And it's not a decision that just applies to Indigenous communities. We see that same decision making apply to healthcare, where people who need access to medication, they're told to wait, but pharmaceuticals companies who want profits, they're saying, we got you, we're going to protect your profits. These are decisions that governments are making. Liberals and conservatives have continued to make decisions that benefit those at the top, that hurt people, that hurt families. That is what they've been doing. The Indigenous communities are a powerful example of this priority that's put on the wealthy and the people at the top, not the families that need it, not the Indigenous communities that need it, and we can change that. And that's what I'm saying to Canadians, that we do not have to settle for less. We can actually build a better country, and I'm committed to doing that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Merci.